Support for Digging Deeper comes from the Penn State Alumni Association, connecting alumni to the university and to each other. The Alumni Association is powered by pride. Learn more at alumni.psu.edu. And from viewers like you, thank you.
Hi, I'm Elisa Vasquez. We often hear about automation these days. From assembly lines to self-driving cars and customer service, automation touches almost every sector of the economy. But what does automation actually mean, and how will it change the economy and workforce in the coming years? On this episode of Digging Deeper, Penn State President Eric Barron talks to Barry Ikes, Professor of Economics, and Vasant Hanavar, Director of the Artificial Intelligence Research Laboratory, about automation and the economy.
Well, welcome. Interesting topic. I've been reading all these books about automation and artificial intelligence because everybody's talking about it, and I'm not even sure whether everybody knows what it means. So when someone says automation, what do you think?
Well, automation is basically whatever used to be done by people through manual work is being done by machines, so that would be automation.
And a machine can be a computer, it can be a physical robot,
Right.
It could be any of those things.
In some sense, automation is a process that's been going on throughout the Industrial Revolution. You know, we had looms that replaced weavers,
Printing presses
printing
that replace.
presses, the steam engine, all sorts of developments. Automation is just a way in which we use machines to reduce the amount of labor needed to produce.
So that's a wonderful perspective, because it says, hey, we're just in the flow of this that's been going on for decades and decades and even centuries. So are people excited about it a little differently? Is it because they feel like they might be replaced?
Well, I think the difference is historically through the Industrial Revolution and until fairly recently, the part of the work that was being automated was physical labor, and often work that was dangerous, what people didn't really want to do. But I think what's different now is that we are talking about what used to be considered, cognitive work, knowledge work.
Something that couldn't be replicated by a
Yeah, so
machine.
something that requires expertise, years of training, like radiologists and doctors and some work that's done by lawyers. And so the things that require, tasks that we normally thought required a lot of skill.
A lot of skill and brain power.
And that's what is different, and I think that's the thing that I think most people are trying to grapple with.
So there's the thing we're most proud of as humans. Before it's labor saving, this is now all of a sudden, it's getting a little too close to what I am.
Well, it's still, it was always labor saving, and this is still labor saving. But
Yeah.
what I think is true is that now, people who are more able to complain in writing and in media are fearing losing their jobs, as
Losing their
opposed
job.
to, when it was coal miners or horse and buggy being replaced by cars.
So
it
as
wasn't
you're
as-
also saying who is being replaced
Yes.
is important in this
Right.
particular equation. Can we give a little bit of a definition of artificial intelligence and where it's going and what's difficult? Because my sort of understanding now is that there are some things like asking your phone a question and going and looking up in a database, playing chess, which we used to think was an enormous challenge, which now is not, that these are one type of artificial intelligence, but there's much deeper learning possibilities that are there that are in a completely different order. So when we're thinking about all this job replacement and the importance of the cognitive part of it and who's being replaced, are we thinking in this deeper sense, and the rest of this is becoming fairly normal? A machine can play chess?
Well, I think so. It's possibly useful to distinguish between two types of AI,
Yeah.
artificial intelligence. So there is artificial intelligence that is in narrow domains, meaning there's a very narrowly defined task, like reading, what a radiologist does, for example, looking at a image and coming to some conclusions, versus intelligence in a broad sense, like what we normally, right now we're having an open-ended conversation. And I think the progress in AI has been tremendous in narrow domains. There are many really hard unsolved problems if you are trying to generalize that to a broad sense of completely open-ended intelligence. That said, I think this progress in narrow domains, partly because of advances in algorithms, but largely because of availability of massive data sets on which you could train these so-called machine learning algorithms. That's what's enabling progress in these narrow domains, to the point where some of these AI systems are able to perform at a level that's comparable to, in some narrow cases, even better than the humans. And so then that's in still a very limited set of settings, but so I don't think the question is so much about whether all jobs will be gone and whether all people will be replaced by machines, but there will be tasks in almost any job that are amenable to automation. How much of that in what jobs, that sort of depends on the spectrum. By some accounts, maybe 50% of what we do and get paid for, when I say we, humans at large, could potentially be automated and by AI and some combination of things. And that then means, what are those people going to do with the 50% of the time that now they are not getting paid? And so, and then, I think only 5% or some accounts, 5% or less of the total number of jobs as such would be eliminated through automation. But almost every job will change as a result of AI and automation becoming part of it. I heard an interesting quote by somebody that works in the domain of medicine, and he said, it's unlikely that all physicians would be replaced by AI, but physicians that don't understand AI would be replaced by physicians that do. I think that sort of thing could be applied to many different fields where there is increasing amount of
So
this.
maybe we could really get down to some things that are contextual, some examples of which jobs, which types of things might really change dramatically, which ones come into the category that perhaps a machine can tell you whether you have a fracture on an X-ray even better than a human. Maybe we could have sort of a sense of how do we see this rolling out in the job market in a way.
If we talk about the job market, before we step back one bit, I think there's several processes that take place with automation. One is this displacement effect. Okay? So we have a machine that displaces a worker. Right? So that's one effect, and there's a direct effect. The workers, have a right to fear that effect. As a result of that, when you automate, productivity goes up. When productivity goes up, that creates more wealth and creates more demand for labor. So that sort of offsets the displacement effect. And plus, you have to produce the machines, and the people who produce the machines is demand for labor. But the most important factor is that automation all technological change creates new tasks that we didn't think of before. And that's very likely with automation and artificial intelligence, things that we didn't think about. So it's not just a direct replacement of the cashier at the supermarket with a scanner, but new things we can do because of barcodes. With the hospital, they can identify you using the bar scanners. And it's these new tasks, the process of creating these new tasks that could create enough demand for labor to offset the displacement effects. That's what that's hard to foresee. But then the real issue, and this is what we're sort of coming to, is this mismatch of skills.
Yes.
So
That occurs now.
that will occur in this process because
Yeah.
people will lose jobs and there will be new jobs that will be created, like in the physician story, but they have to be the correct types of skills. And if all these problems occur because of these mismatches. When there's mismatch of skills and other frictions in the labor market, that causes unemployment. That makes the adjustment much more painful than it would otherwise be.
I mean, you mentioned Industrial Revolution earlier, right? I mean, the Industrial Revolution, when it occurred, it took almost 200 years for it to play itself out. I mean, out of that came this massive demand for raw materials and massive demand for large markets, which led to colonization and many other things. So I think, this is potentially very transformative. We don't fully understand it. But it's clear that there'll be gaps in skills, so we have to rethink how we train people. But going back to your question about what types of jobs and what aspects of those, I think things that are closer to physical labor would be the first ones to be automated. Predictable environments where the more or less you can expect what will happen when you do something. Those are the tasks that are more likely to be
The
amenable.
more it's likely to be repetitive and routine.
Repetitive, routine, or predictable, more or less predictable. And then the ones that
There's 6 solutions to this.
right.
You could be in category A, B, C, or D. You're clearly in D.
Yeah, and there's some
This
way
is
to
it.
figure that
and
out.
it's
right.
there's some algorithm, some
That
that puts you there. Yeah.
Right. And then you go to slightly or tasks where where there is massive amounts of data and label data. So, for example, radiology as one example. You mentioned some
Yeah.
other, right? And you have enough data, so you can train a machine to kind of pick out what features of the data are predictive of some particular outcome.
I mean,
Yeah,
we-
you can do that.
I
mean,
can
you
see it, and we like an experienced physician.
right.
Well, that machine is capable of looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of things, and
Right.
then of course that equates to experience.
It
right?
equates to
Yeah.
experience. However, I think at least the few studies that exist that have looked at fully AI systems versus physicians and combinations thereof have found that the combination is often more accurate than either machine or the human in some
Put them together.
when you put them together. Then that raises the whole new question. I mean, if you have to think about these human-machine systems, what is the optimal way to design them? We haven't done AI that way.
Yeah.
AI was always traditionally
Never
about,
done it as a brain interface with a human.
or even more naturalistic interaction with
Sorry.
the human. Right.
No,
yeah.
yeah.
Right. So that's something that we need to be thinking about. And then there are tasks that are harder to automate simply because of the, less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has to be more creative, more
Right.
more
So
even taking a chance, more experimental, more.
Yeah, creativity, more analytical kind of thinking. So I think if going back to skills, I think those are the areas where we need to be emphasizing, not some rote body of knowledge or
Yeah.
routine.
So if we go through that and I take this population where it tends to be more repetitive, more predictive, more manual, is there an economic outcome for that group of the population that works well for them? Or because of perhaps their educational foundation or something like that, is that the population that you would put at most risk to automation?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of there's always going to be losers in these situations. And when the Luddites were breaking machines in the early part of the 19th century because they didn't want to lose their jobs when the looms were coming, they were right to worry about their job loss. I mean, they did
Because
lose
they
their
did lose
jobs.
their job, yeah.
I mean, productivity grew and we became wealthy as a result, but there are real losers. And the transition in the former socialist countries, a lot of people lost everything, and then a lot of people are gained. The young people have gained, and the winners never compensate the losers. That's sort of a problem. I mean, it's possible in policy, but we never do it. And the same thing happens with trade disruption. When we have trade liberalization, some some industries, the workers are hurt, and other industries, people gain.
Yeah.
Usually the winners outnumber the losers, but the losers feel that pain. And if we don't have, it's up to policy to set up mechanisms to help with the people who lose from these changes, especially if society is going to really gain from automation and AI. Then and there's going to be big productivity gains and big wealth gains and big GDP gains. That would afford the resources to enable us to deal with the people who are hurt by it.
So, and you said policy, but it makes me think about who implements the policy. Is it the corporations that have replaced people? Do they take a role in this? Never.
Well, unlikely. It's
It's
probably
very
the
unlikely.
government.
Yeah.
But one thing that is relevant to that, I mean, government policy typically subsidizes the adoption of the capital or the automation. So we have like investment tax credits, accelerated depreciation. That enables the company to adopt capital equipment, which could be the automation that displaces the worker. We could have government policy that gives tax credits for retraining labor to be able to work with AI. We don't, but we could, and if we did, that would enable the adjustment to be smoother.
Now, what about the other end of the spectrum, those that are capable to interface with the machine? Do these become the new elites? I don't know what kind of name.
I mean,
to give
I
them.
don't know whether it's elite, but certainly they would be, they would thrive in this, new world where the humans and machines work side by side in a very cooperative sort of fashion. And some of the technologies for doing that are not quite there because historically, when people were working on AI, they were thinking about automating something. That was the challenge. I think increasingly there is an emphasis on sort of reframing that in terms of developing systems that work side by side with people. There's also other aspects of it which maybe have been touched on in other conversations. Is if you don't want a completely autonomous entity that sort of violates
does
human
things.
values,
Yeah.
right? So constraining this,
Or is even confused by human values.
yes. So there is a whole field of AI where now we are thinking about sort of constraining the design of and operation of these systems, by constraints that reflect human values, safety of these systems, many things that we didn't have to worry about when AI was not so good.
Yeah.
Right now we have to worry about them, and while AI may not ever be intelligent in the same way as a human, in some tasks because of the speed of computers and so on, it can outpace human capabilities. And so that raises its own set of questions.
So maybe maybe it's a lot of a similar kind of thought process, but if I divided this in there, what is really exciting you about this, and then ask you, what are you really worried about in this space? Right now, what are you really excited about in this space, in terms of what the world might become?
I think I'm excited about the possibility of being able to take on some major societal challenges with these advances in technology. The ability to really look at large amounts of data and draw.
Transform the health industry.
Transform the health. Yes, right. So those
Transform pharmaceuticals.
Right. So almost any field of study you can imagine, that's the potential that excites me. The thing that sort of two things that worry me. One is that maybe it's a little bit of way of flipping this around. So maybe the AI that we think is so smart is not smart enough. Okay, by that I mean we put too much trust in the system, but that's not quite ready to be that smart, right? So I think that because when you read the popular literature, there is a sense that AI is advanced to the point that it can do anything. So, but that's not really true. I think there are limitations. The other thing is, of course, the thing that worries me, not necessarily as an AI scientist, but as just a citizen, is the sorts of things that he was referring to, right? So the disruption has to be managed, and the transition has to be managed.
And if you don't,
And I don't know whether we have the right sort of conversations taking place in that
yeah.
realm.
Barry, if you,
I would, you
how
know,
would you do the two answers?
Yes, I mean, what excites me is it's another technological revolution that could increase productivity growth, and it could increase worldwide wealth. I mean, it's like, you know, electricity or like computers. This is another wave of things where it will create all sorts of new jobs, all sorts of new goods, all sorts of new employment. That's all well to the good. I mean, many, you know, forecasts see, you know, very large rise in output, world output due to automation and AI. And what worries me is the transition effects. The transition effects could be very costly, and there could be large differentiation. I mean, it could be AI and automation are more likely to be implemented in the developed world than in the developing world. I mean, you know, it's when workers are cheap, you don't need to automate. When workers are expensive, you automate. So there'll be more here, and there'll be more differentiation. Could lead to more inequality, and you know, it could lead to more geographical concentration, just like Silicon Valley.
Is, yeah.
Those are it's mostly the transition effects and the differentiation, and the positive is the wealth gain.
So you mentioned sort of the cost of labor, but there's another aspect to it, which is sort of the aging population and the what dynamics. So when I was just reading something, and I think the 4 countries that are at the top in terms of the amount of work that, you know, the fraction of work, not necessarily jobs, the fraction of work that could be automated is United States, India, China, and Japan. Okay, that's the 4 that make up the bulk of this, but they are all different. I mean, you know, China and India have large populations, but the demographics between China and India are now diverging. And in Japan, you know the story, right?
Yep.
And the United States is what it is. And so the 4 largest areas where this could have the biggest impact are quite different. And how it could play out in those economies is anybody's guess.
Just fascinating. There's so many different questions that we could keep talking about. I wish we hadn't run out of time to do it, because there's everything from what we see in the movies in robot armies to Hal there in 2001,
Exactly.
all of a sudden deciding he knew what was best, to my favorite, which is the Jetsons, which I think they knew it. They knew what was going to happen there. Well, thank you so much for your time. Such a fascinating topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, President Barron, for joining us. Automation, artificial intelligence.
Fascinating topics.
Yes, and he talked about, both of the people that were on the show, about the economic growth, new tasks. How do you think that's going to affect our economy and our society?
I don't see how it can help but have a tremendous impact, both from who it affects, but also, you heard them talk about the policy and the degree to which the nation then has to decide to invest to make sure that those tasks are realized and humans get to take advantage of them, which turns it straight to what's the role of a university. So there's the policy, there's the retraining. Who does the retraining? And that takes you to this whole notion that we always talk about lifelong learning, and that, the students we're graduating today, they may change jobs 3, 4, 5 times. They may have a completely different skill set they need. Out from under them comes a particular task, and they got the brain power to learn the next thing. I think it has a rather profound impact.
And that impact, like you said, is going to affect universities across not just the nation, but the world. How do you think that Penn State should just prepare for these changes?
Well, so one is I'd really like to see what we do in AI to be strengthened, so that we are educating students. Who knows, maybe it becomes a gen ed class sometime in the future. That would be sort of remarkable. But let's make sure we're on the cutting edge of what's going on. But we'll also be thinking about what is the AI interface with our students. Do advisors answer the routine question because it's an AI that is doing it? And that allows the advisor to spend their time on the more complicated part of it or the more personal part of it that they don't get a chance to do, because now they've been freed from the routine and they can start thinking about the individual person and their success. So you could see there could be tremendous benefit, but we'll have to find a way to invest if we're going to be successful, to have that transition ourselves, enable students to understand what's going on, and make sure we have people be able to learn new things in order to address changing careers.
Well, I fully believe with the Penn State Network we'll be able to invest, and I'm excited to see where
I
Penn State goes.
certainly hope so. We're good at that.
Yes, thank you, President Barron.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Support for Digging Deeper comes from the Penn State Alumni Association, connecting alumni to the university and to each other. The Alumni Association is powered by pride. And from viewers like you. Thank you.